noise!
Welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine. If you enjoy this programming, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Join Truth and Rhythm's membership program through Patreon. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm.
I'm delighted to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership singer Brenda Bennett, best known for her work with Prince protege groups Vanity 6 and Apollonia 6. Their hits include Nasty Girl and Sex Shooter, and she can also be heard on Prince's 17 Days. Having sung lead on songs like Blue Limousine, Bite the Beat, Some Kind of Lover, and A Million Miles, as a member of those groups, she also toured with Prince and appeared in the movie Purple Rain. Prior to Prince, she performed on concert bills with Mott the Hoople and Queen, was subsequently inducted into the Rhode Island Music Hall of Fame, and has continued to release her own music. Brenda, thank you for joining the show. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. Where are you today? Are you in Rhode Island or whereabouts?
I am in Rhode Island, yes.
Okay.
Southern New England.
Yeah.
It's starting to look beautiful. It gets really beautiful here about this time.
I can imagine. I've never had the pleasure of being up in that area, but I hope to one day. I guess Massachusetts is probably the closest I've met.
That's not very far away. It's very close.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, good. I'm glad we could connect. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it, and so will the viewers and listeners.
Thank you.
I'm going to test your memory banks a little bit, and hopefully it won't be too repetitive with other interviews, but hopefully we'll find out something new along the way if it is. But so can you tell me a little bit about growing up, and what first drew you to music and what your biggest inspirations were in that regard?
What drew me to music? Well, I grew up in a musical household. My parents were country musicians. They weren't professional, unless you want to call doing playing in the band that did oh gosh, I'm watching the dancing going on in front of me. Square dancing. There used to be square dances once a month in certain different places, and sometimes my mom was the singer for the group that was playing, and my father played guitar. My mother played piano. She played accordion and sang. My father sang, and he had a really nice voice, but he didn't like singing, so I always left it up to her. But he played guitar, and he comes from a musical family. Everybody in his family played an instrument, and it was primarily because that was their entertainment. They didn't have much else of anything else. They might have had a radio in the house or something like that, but he played guitar. One of his brothers played guitar. His other brother played steel lap guitar, and his sister played accordion. The grandparents, they didn't play anything, but so I was around music all my life. My mother was more eclectic. My father was very purist with country music. And my mom liked different things. She liked some show music. She liked some jazz. What else? What did we used to listen to? She certainly liked rock and roll. And she wasn't, there was never really, the only thing that we had a problem with in the house when I was growing up, as far as any music, was the volume. You know, there were the volume wars. My father would be downstairs in the basement at his workbench doing something, and he'd have a radio on with country music playing. And then my brothers would be upstairs. One of my brothers would be upstairs, and he'd be playing bass to the Seeds and cranking it on the hi-fi because he wanted to hear it over the country music. And then when he'd get louder, my father would get louder, and then he would get, you know, so it was crazy. But other than that, as far as any type of music, I really, you know, I liked listening to the country music, especially listening to my parents play and going with them to their friend's house. They used to go, they played every weekend. They would go to somebody's house. It would be, you know, within the vicinity, but it was always somebody else's house every weekend. Sometimes it was our house, and there'd be, you know, 15, 20 people crammed into the living room, all playing. I would just be over in the corner absorbing it all and listening and watching. And there was just so many different crazy little instruments that I had no idea what they were, some of them. But there was, you know, there was banjo, there was a plethora of guitars. There was a woman that played like the washboard kind of thing. There was a friend of my father's that he used to go fishing with a lot. He played it wasn't an ocarina. It looked like a petrified avocado that had about 4 holes in it. And he would play that like a flute type instrument of some kind. And there was somebody that'd be playing spoons. I learned how to play spoons. And I didn't really, it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 years old that I really decided that, you know, I started finding myself inside searching for something that I could latch on to. I don't know that I recognized it as being a change that I needed. I just knew that I wanted to hear something different. I wanted to hear something more that was out there. I liked some of the classical music my mother exposed me to. And I didn't find it until one Friday night watching the Jack Parr show. It used to be on every Friday night. And I think he was the precursor to the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like to look in the TV guide to see who was playing, because there was always one musical situation that he was going to have on as a guest. And what he had listed was, or what was listed in the guide was he was going to be showing footage of a popular musical group from England called the Beatles. And I remember looking at it going, the Beatles, ugh. Why would anybody want to call themselves the Beatles? You know, you just think of a bug. And my mother said, "What did you say?" So I told her, and she said, "Oh, that sounds odd for a name." So I watched it. A friend was over that night. She was staying overnight for the night, and we watched it, and it clicked. Hearing that music, how simple it was, but it wasn't like a poppy that we know as pop now. It was some, you know, there was just something about it that was different and very attractive to me. And it was just 4 guys, and I found out that they write their own music. And because I always thought that it must be complicated to write music. I started writing poetry when I was about 10 or 11. So that did it. That's mine. That's my music right there.
You're the first person ever influenced by the Beatles that way. I mean, God, you think of how many thousands of people, millions, maybe even they influenced. It's unbelievable.
Mm, yeah. And it just it carried over even now, as I did an acoustic version a couple of years back. I recorded an acoustic version of Blue Limousine. And by the time my co-producer and engineer, George Dussault, by the time we finished with it, we were listening to the final mix, and I looked at him and I said, "This sounds like a Beatles song."
Hmm.
And just so some of it's kind of carried over into some of my stuff. It just still is ingrained in me. I was I was borrowing a record player so I could play the records I bought. My mother was saying, "What are you, crazy? We don't have anything to play this on yet," at that time. And why are you spending your money on your hard-earned allowance that you earn every week? Why are you spending it on something you can't even listen to? And I said, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find a way. And fortunately, a lot of the times, their music was played on the radio, so I got to listen to it when I couldn't find somebody I could borrow a record player from. Yeah.
Do you remember, Brenda, the first like rock concert or soul concert, whatever it was that you saw in person?
Manfred Mann. Wait a minute. Hold that thought. No, it wasn't Manfred Mann. There was it's not here anymore. There was a really exciting amusement park that used to be here called Rocky Point. And it was Dion.
Run around Sue.
Yep. It was Dion. That was the first one. Yeah. And then it went on from there. And I started going to live shows. I started sneaking into live shows. There was the only place that you could watch besides that place, which was open in the summertime, the Rhode Island Reds hockey team out of Providence. They had their own hockey rink, and it was called Rhode Island Auditorium. And that was the place and there was also another place called the Warwick Tent, where it was a small revolving stage in a big, huge tent, like a circus tent. And that was in Warwick, Rhode Island. That doesn't exist anymore. But there was a lot of groups that came through and played there. And I saw the Young Rascals. I saw Cream. I saw Jimi Hendrix back in the 60s. Wow. At Rhode Island Auditorium. I still have a ticket that it was like $5, I think.
Yeah. Crazy looking at those tickets.
But all of those memories, when I think back of those early music things, there was a lot more stuff I was involved in than I thought, I remember the first time seeing Bonnie Raitt was in the 60s, and Brown University on the Quad, they would set up a stage in the springtime. They would hold, an outdoor musical kind of thing. James Taylor played, and there was a number of other people. And then my friend, same one that used to stay overnight, her name was Paula. She and I, we would take a bus up to the city from where we were living. And there was times that we would walk some of the streets on the east side to listen for music, to see if there was anybody playing, because they'd be playing out in their backyards, the bands here and there and everywhere. And so we went and we got in, we snuck into the thing that was going on at Brown University. And I remember sitting on a lawn, and they were changing the stage up a little bit for the next person to come on. And I'm watching to see what kind of instruments are being set up. and there's a bass guitar that's being put on the rack, and then I see there's an electric Stratocaster put on the rack. And I thought, okay, it's another guys group coming, that's going to play. And next thing I know, they're announcing this person, Bonnie Raitt. And I went, Bonnie Raitt, isn't that a girl's name? And this beautiful, wavy, red-haired woman comes out on the stage, and she didn't, back then, most of the women that got on stage had an acoustic guitar on. She didn't have a guitar on when she came out on the stage, and she went up to the mic to say hello, and she turned around and she reached for the Stratocaster, and she put that on, and I went, oh, what is she doing? She's going to play an electric guitar? And not only that, but partway through the song, she starts playing slide. And I was just like, what the heck? What is this? And the woman's doing this? I was floored. And I'm still a fan of Bonnie Raitt.
Yeah, I saw her open for an Aerosmith show in the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thought that was early, but man, seeing her then, wow.
Where was that show? Where did you see that?
California.
California?
Yeah.
We opened for Aerosmith at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia. The first band that I was in, Ken Lyon and Tombstone Blues Band. We were on CBS Records. That's how the whole thing happened with Queen, Mott the Hoople. So yeah, I was at Woodstock.
You were? My wife at 3 years old was at Woodstock.
Really?
Her mom went and had her with her. Yeah.
I was at Woodstock. I swam naked in the pond. I listened to Jimi Hendrix Sunday morning. As I was waking up, I could hear him playing, and I ran for the stage.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. That was a very amazing experience.
Jeez. So how did you sort of break into singing, at the level where you'd be able to perform in front of people like that?
The first actual singing in front of people that was outside of a choir or a chorus. I sang in choirs and choruses through school. Church didn't have one, so I didn't sing with that one. But a friend of mine was a folk artist, Tony Foley, and he and another gentleman had this little folk duo thing going, and they were doing quite a few things around the area, playing in a lot of places. And there was this one weekend where there was 2 or 3 shows or gigs that they had scheduled, but something came up with his partner's family that he couldn't do these gigs. Tony didn't want to lose the money. He had heard me singing, just playing my guitar and singing a few little la-di-da-da-da-da songs, and he recruited me saying, I need you to do this. I don't want to lose the money. I don't want to lose the gigs. He was afraid that if he canceled the gigs, he was going to not be able to be rehired back in those places. And I said, you want me to do it? And he says, yeah. He says, I'll play guitar. You don't have to worry about anything. Just sing harmonies with me and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. So I did. And that was my first exposure. It was at a place where, funny enough, when I used to go to, it's a club called the Bond View. And it's right on the beach. And always had a lot of music. It was actually it was pretty much a bar for fishermen more than anything else, more than like a club, as a lot of people know it. There was always music there, and in one capacity or another, and that's where we played. And then I used to also, that was the only time, was that one weekend that I did this with him. So that was my first exposure in front of the audience. And I got paid. And I was like, ooh, I can make some money with this. Oh, wow. Maybe I ought to think about that. So, but time went on, and it wasn't, it really to be totally honest with you, doing music and doing gigs, I enjoyed it. I loved it. I was around it. I grew up with it. It was in my life, had been always in my life up to that time, and always will be in my life. But it's not, I didn't aspire to be a famous person or to be on stage doing music all the time. It was, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a painter. And I was doing lots of different art type stuff. But I had gone on a 3-month backpacking trip in Europe with my boyfriend at the time and a couple of friends. And when we came, I used to, before that actually happened, I used to go to the Bonneview quite a bit because there was a rhythm and blues band that used to play there a lot. And it was Ken Lyon and the Tombstone Blues Band. And I loved the music. I loved his voice. I loved dancing to it. And I would go there quite often to see them because I lived in the area at that time. And then there was this 3 or 4 month backpacking trip that was in Europe. And when I got back, I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. I really didn't have a place to live on my own. I had one American dime in my pocket when I landed at JFK Airport, and I used it to call my mother, reverse charges, to let her know I was back and I was, safe. And my father's in the background, get your ass home, because he was really afraid for me to go over. He kept saying, I really don't want you to do this. I really don't want you to do this. I'm afraid that something's going to happen. And I said, no, it'll be fine. I was, 20 years old, I think, 21 years old at the time or something. And so I was bulletproof. And I went. I was going and I went. But when I got back, I didn't have anything to do, didn't have a job or anything. And my mother said to me, Sibylla has been trying to reach you. I was, Sibylla? And I knew that was the other girl singer that was in Ken Lyon and Tombstone. And I knew her from that band, but I also knew her from another band. Beautiful voice. She was a phenomenal singer. And I said, did she say what she wanted? And she said, no, I told her that you were still in Europe and we didn't know when you were coming back and maybe she'll call. And I said, okay. Did she leave a phone number? And she said, no. And I said, all right. Well, I guess I had been home about a week and I was starting to try and figure out what I was going to do and where I was going to go next. And I got the call from Sibylla saying that the band had landed a recording contract with CBS with Charles Coverman. And they had 2 girls for the lineup in the group, Sibylla and this other girl. This other girl walked out. She decided the group wasn't for her. She didn't want to do it. And they were going to just continue on without her. But Charles said, no, that's the lineup I saw. That's the lineup I want. I want 2 girls. So Kenny was never one for doing something like, calling up the local musicians union to see if there was anybody available. He just, he did everything word of mouth. Do you know anybody? You got a friend? Do you have a friend that has a friend or something like this? And Sibylla remembered listening to me, hearing me. I used to work with her husband, Joe. We were we did leather artistry at the time. And every once in a while I would be in the house and I'd grab her guitar and I'd start messing about, and so she remembered this. So she said, listen, we got a contract with CBS Records. We're getting ready to go in the studio to record the first album, and we need another female vocalist, a backup singer. And I think you could do the job. So, I felt like, what do I have to lose? Nothing. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. I can't promise you anything, but I'll give it a try. And 3 days later, I was out at Block Island on stage, getting my feet wet. No rehearsals. Kenny just said, listen, I've known you being around the band. You came to hear us play a lot, and I think you know the music enough. You can do the background vocals. Just jump in and get your feet wet. This is his motto. And I was like, oh, okay. So I did. And that's how it started. That's how it started. And every time I turned around, when there was a lull in time of nothing happening musically, I was like, I'm going to go back to painting. I'm going to get back to my art, And before I knew it, something would slam their hands on my shoulders to say, the universe says you're going this way. You're staying right here in music. This is where you belong. So one thing after another, and that's, kind of, and this is all from some of those musical friends that I had growing up and people I met, people I was around. Some of those people that, they would die for an opportunity. They would die. They would do anything to put them, to be able to be on stage and have an opportunity to do something, for a recording contract with a major record company. I was very appreciative of it. There's a part of me that didn't feel like I belonged there because I didn't feel I had earned it yet, but you have to start somewhere. And I enjoyed the music part of it. I found that what I enjoyed the most, and I still to this day musically enjoy the most, is being in the studio, working in the studio. I like that the most.
So were you on records that were released with that group?
Yeah, we did 2 albums. The first album was released in April of 1974. And the second album never got released. There was a real lot of changes going on with the management. And also when we were on tour, we got kicked off the plane a few times because the boys got rowdy. And that didn't go down too well with CBS. But
how would you categorize the style? Was it like blues-based rock or something else, or what was it?
It was rhythm and blues. Yeah, it was blues-based. There was some rock in there. There's some stuff on YouTube under Ken Lyon and Tombstone. Sing Song City was our first hit. And then I think Sugar Bones was the second one. And my first composition that was ever on an album, they chose one of my songs, Hold Me Closer. And it was it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It's the last song on the first side of the album, because it's more country folk than what the rest, the Tombstone band, what we were doing with Tombstone. But everybody seems to love that song. I still get requests, from people who will say, "Oh, you remember Hold Me Closer? I love that song." Or somebody will text me and say, "You're not going to believe this. I just heard Hold Me Closer over the PA music that was just playing." And I'm like, what? 1974? And it still pops out every once in a while.
Wow.
When I was inducted into the Rhode Island Music Hall of Fame the first time, we did that song. We did a version of that song. I was inducted twice. Once for being a member of that band, of Ken Lyon and Tombstone, and once for my own contributions as a solo artist to music.
And so are there, a couple of other artists you would say that, influenced you in terms of your singing or your compositions or, that sort of thing?
Well, once Joni Mitchell was a big one. I loved the way her music moved. It was very flavorful, I guess is a word I could choose. And I liked her lyrics were clever to me, and how she expressed her emotions about a situation or about a relationship or a person or something. I really liked how high she sang too, because I've never been able, I've sung at one time. I had a 4-octave range. Now it's more like a 3-octave range, but I could never sing that high as well as she does or did, And as time went on, I mean, the Beatles were the biggest one, the first ones. But as time went on, I started listening to stuff like Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green. This is before Stevie Nicks and all that stuff. Bloodwind Pig, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, Manfred Mann, the Animals. Who else was a big one there? Well, and the Byrds. I was listening to the Byrds, Cream. There was a lot of things that I was listening to, and I don't know how much it may have influenced my writing, because at that time I didn't write as much as I did as time, later on in my career.
At what point did you become affiliated with the acts that opened up for shows for some of those bigger acts that we've mentioned, like Queen or Mott the Hoople and so forth?
When the Tombstone album came out, CBS wanted to put us on tour to promote the album, obviously. And they didn't really have a lot going on. Aerosmith and us were signed at the same time, around the same time. Aerosmith was signed just a little bit before us. Them being from Boston, us being from Rhode Island. And I used to feel now and then it was kind of like a contest, that in a sense where CBS was watching us carefully and seeing who was going to really be the ones that were going to go the extra mile or to do this or whatnot, But we played a few gigs together. We opened up for Aerosmith because they started getting a couple of bigger hits than we did. But when the album came out and they wanted to put us on the road and they wanted to put us on tour, they didn't really have anybody particular that they could jump to say, okay, we got to put them out with this. We certainly weren't going to be headlining. We hadn't earned that yet. So Mott had just finished up doing a European tour, was getting ready to come over here to America. And next thing I know, I'm hearing, okay, we're gonna do this tour. We're gonna do a tour. We are, and yep, and we got to be in Denver, Colorado, April 14th, which was Ken Lyon's birthday. And I said, who are we touring with? And I remember Kenny sitting there going, this English rock and roll faggot band called Mott the Hoople. And I went, what? Who? And he said, Mott the Hoople. And I went, oh, all the young dudes. I loved the song. Didn't realize or knew at the time that it was written by David Bowie. So I was excited. I was excited to just, okay, we're going on tour. This is cool. Let's do it. And Queen was not in the mix at first. I don't know what all the background details were that placed them there. At the time, there was talk of the fact that they had done some shows with Mott in Europe, and both the bands got on really well with each other, and that they did really well as a show. The two bands were very well received as a show, and so next thing I know, Queen was coming over, Queen was going to be appearing as well, and I thought this was kind of ludicrous. There's going to be 3 bands So we opened for Queen, and Queen opened for Mott the Hoople. And that was how that's how that affiliation came about. And
Two English bands and you guys.
yes. And funny enough, here's Kenny spouting away saying how much, he thought Mott the Hoople was an English rock and roll faggot band, and they were pretty down to earth in terms of what they dressed, how they dressed on stage, and some of the how they reacted with each other or whatnot. But Kenny loved Freddie, and he loved Brian. And one of our guitar players, Paul DiChiara, was a phenomenal guitar player. Every time we played anywhere, no matter who was around, the guitar player of the band would be on the side of the stage, just Hawkeye and Paul, and watching him. This man had such a touch, and he was really, really amazing. He and Brian May, we used to have jam sessions with Brian May after the show sometimes in the hotel room. And when we were on tour with them. So it was a friendship that developed with those guys throughout that tour. And we didn't stay on the tour for the whole length of time that the tour was supposed to have been, in place. For one thing, Brian got sick with hepatitis. Brian May, and they had to shuffle back to England. And we had other things that we had to do. We had other shows that we were doing. We were opening up for other people, Canned Heat, a big festival up in Sarasota, New York that we were doing. And a couple of shows here and there with Aerosmith. We were opening for Edgar White.
Winter.
Yes, Edgar Winter and White Trash. Steppenwolf, So we were busy, and we were working on material for the next album.
Wow. So what transpired in your life, Brenda, between, that period and, meeting or, getting introduced to the Prince situation?
I think I was in about 4 iterations of the Ken Lyon and Tombstone Blues Band. The band kept breaking up after a certain amount of time, whether it was from drugs and alcohol, whether it was just craziness. But we would be together for a certain amount of time until things just got to the point where it imploded, and then we all have to go our own way. And this happened. Like I went through this with them 4 times. And after the 4th time, actually after the 3rd time, I said, that's it. I'm done. And I didn't do anything musically for a while until I was living down Georgetown, Washington, D.C. area. And I got a phone call from my brother, who was a phenomenal bass player, my older brother, who was playing with a bunch of people up in Fairbanks, Alaska. It's when the pipeline was being built. And they were making lots of money. And they were having lots of fun. And they needed a singer. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm getting ready to pack up and go back to Rhode Island. Why? He said, well, don't pack up and go back to Rhode Island. Come out here. We need a singer, and we need you. Come out, And I'm going, where are you? Fairbanks, Alaska? And he says, yeah, it's beautiful. You'll love it. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? And I said, what do you got? What are you doing? They were doing heavy metal rock and roll and some blues in a couple of clubs out in Fairbanks. And they were doing really well. And I had been looking for an opportunity to learn how to become a lead singer, not just a backup singer anymore. Take another step. And so at the time, it only cost $50 round trip to fly from JFK Airport to Fairbanks, because they were trying to get people up there, to work the pipeline stuff and things connected with the pipeline. So I brought my guitar in my backpack and I went to Fairbanks. And I did that. And there was other local groups that I was trying to hone my chops with as a lead singer. And I got involved with a couple of situations here that seemed promising. But then they kind of fell apart for whatever reason. And I found myself in another one of those periods of time where I just said, all right, I got to kick back and just figure this out. And that was when my best friend in the world at the time, and it had been for 5 or 6 years, we became romantically involved. And that was with Roy Bennett. And he was looking to get his first break in the music business as a lighting and set designer. He'd been working as a roadie for a local lighting company here, Apollonia Lighting. And he was meeting a lot of people, learning a lot of the ropes of stuff connected with, especially the lighting situation. And he's one of these people. Paul McCartney has this ability. He's one of these people who can see music in color when he hears it. So it's really helped him as a lighting and set designer.
Yeah, there's an actual term for that.
Yeah, something ceases. I can't remember.
Freesia something, or
yeah. And so he wanted to. He was looking for that opportunity, and he was in the right place at the right time, and he was hired by Prince to do the Dirty Mind tour. And he was very excited. I was very excited for him. And we were going together. We were having this romantic relationship, and things looked great. And he asked me to marry him, and of course I accepted. And the next thing I know, the show was the tour was in New York City. Came to New York City, and Prince was going to do a show at the Ritz. And so Roy called and said, you hop on a train, come on down. I really want you to meet him. I want you to come and see the show, and I really want you to meet him. I really think this guy's going to be really big. I think he's going to really do a lot of stuff. So I said, all right, I'm on my way. So I got on the train, went down to New York City, and met with Roy. We went out for dinner with a couple of people on the crew, and we're hanging out at the hotel room, at the hotel bar, actually, and trying to get to sleep that night. And in New York is not quite a quiet town, but there seemed like to be a lot more siren action going on at one point than, I thought might be usual. I found myself going, is this a common thing to have this much sirens blowing away? And come to find out, the next morning or the next day, in the elevator going down to the restaurant in the hotel, was John Lennon had gotten shot. And I nearly lost it. I mean, because he was my Beatle. I loved his voice. I loved his writing. He was my favorite. And I said, is he shot? Is he okay? What's going on? And they said, no, he's dead. He died. And I'm on the way to go meet Prince. And I'm trying not to cry, because I didn't have time to go back upstairs and fix my makeup or any of that stuff, you know. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this right now. I was really affected. And but by the time we got to the club and we got into the club and everything was going on, and Roy took me up to where Prince was and introduced me and everything. And you know, I had it pretty well back together. And I saw the show that night and had to agree with Roy that this guy was really, really good, and he was different. He was gonna, I thought he was gonna go far as well. And I went back home. Roy and I, that was December of 1980.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.